Does your guitar sound like this? And no, that's not a kill switch. So I've been playing my custom Gordon Smith GS2 for the best part of 5 years now, and after 5 years of punishment on the road in sweaty punk venues, the pickup selector switch has finally started to give up. You'll usually find on guitars that the pickup switch, at least on these kind of guitars, is the first thing to go in a wear and tear part. Now it's very easy to tell when the switch is on the way out because that switch forms part of the circuit. If you're having problems with intermittent sound and things like that, usually the first weak point is the switch. If it's not the switch, it tends to be the pots. If you're just playing at home, you'll probably never have to worry about this at all. But if you're gigging and your guitar is getting subjected to varying temperatures, humidities, tons of sweat, beer, blood, you know, all the usual things, then you're gonna find that this switch does not last long. So with this guitar, what's happening is when I'm in the neck position, sometimes I'm getting intermittent cutouts. And if you just touch the switch as well, you kind of just waggle it around a bit, it starts cutting out. So this is just amp volume in the room, just to show you. Super out of tune. You can kind of hear that scratchy, intermittent cutout. So that's a surefire sign that the switch has just had enough. So it's time to get it on the operating table, get that switch out and put a brand new one in. So the guitar is now on the operating table. So what we'll do is we'll flip it over, get that control plate off and see what we're dealing with on the switch. Let's do it. So on a Les Paul Junior kind of guitar, it's nice and easy. The control switch has its own little plate. You just want to make sure you get the right size screwdriver that isn't going to strip those threads out on the screws, because then you'll have a almighty mess on your hands. Here is where having a little tool tray or somewhere where you can put your screws in comes in super handy, because if you were doing this in the back of a trailer or side of stage, you could really easily lose these suckers. Then you just have to get your screwdriver in or something very small and just gently pry off the little plastic cover. Now of course, being a more higher end guitar, you've got a really neat job there with the routing, and it's all painted inside, no rough cuts. That's what you pay a premium for. Now, as many as my long-term followers will know, on almost every guitar tech tip video that I do, I bang on about how important it is that you know how to solder or to solder, depending on which side of the pond you're on. But I cannot stress enough again how important it is. If you are a guitar tech, you must know how to solder. Okay, this is a kind of repair that wouldn't normally be done in the middle of a tour, but also it could be. If that switch goes down halfway through a tour, you need to be able to whip that sucker out, desolder the current wires, and then solder in a new switch if you can get hold of one on the road, or if you're savvy enough to have spares with you. Pro tip, and this is especially true if you're doing this on the road, do, before you desolder or dismantle any of this wiring, take a whole bunch of pictures, do a sketch if you need to, if that's what you prefer, but make sure that you've recorded every single detail of where each wire goes, because you never know if you're in a rush, if you're under pressure backstage, terrible lighting maybe, you just haven't eaten, haven't got much oxygen to the brain, you could easily forget what you were doing. So make sure you document everything before you take it apart. It sounds really simple to say, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do that. Grab your phone, grab whatever, take a ton of pictures of the existing setup so that once you take it apart, you're not going to forget how it goes back together. Just make sure you can see where all of them go before we go any further. Okay, while this thing heats up, just a reminder that these can do a lot of damage to lacquer on a guitar. So make sure if you're on the road and you're kind of in a janky setup, make sure you've got somewhere safe to put it so that you're not going to damage anything and you're not going to burn yourself, because these suckers are hot. So I've just kind of got a little resting place just off screen where I can safely leave it. Luckily with this soldering iron, it's got a hexed ring around it so it doesn't roll off when you put it on the side, which would be super annoying and dangerous. But what you need to get yourself is a solder sucker. You can do it with those wick things as well, but it's really, really awkward with that. One of these suckers is a way better way of doing it. Essentially, you push that down there. Once you've heated up the solder, you click the button and it basically sucks it into here, bit it out onto a safe piece, and that should desolder your connection. Takes a few goes, but sometimes you can do it in one, just depends on the positioning. Obviously with this cavity is really, really small, so you got to be careful where you put in that soldering iron. Got to be very precise. Heat up the connection, put that on there. It's kind of, you need 20 pairs of hands, but so you heat up the connection, put it on, and then suck the hot solder out, discard it. Should be jobs are good and should. So I'm going to seek to find a better camera angle. It's going to be really tricky because it's kind of over my head and I haven't really got anything for filming overhead. So I'm going to get the Pocket 3 up above my shoulder as best I can and we'll see how we get on. Come back to you. So got our solder sucker primed and ready. What we're going to do is very, very carefully, it's a bit like being a dentist, is put our soldering iron on the connection. Where's my dental assistant? That's what I need. And we're just going to very carefully, without burning the wood, heat up that connection. And I've got the solder sucker pressed against, and we just do it like that. And in this case, we got it in one. See the wire there? I'm not sure if it can focus, but the wire is successfully removed. So again, let's do some dentistry. Let's get in there. Solder sucker at the ready, primed. We're just going to heat up that connection once again. It goes nice and fast. And you got to be quick, obviously, because solder cools down very fast. But it looks to me like we got it again. Almost off in one. Just clinging on by a thread. Obviously, you don't really want to clip these. You could at an absolute push, but it's not good. You want to have the maximum amount of wire left to work with. So this is the best way of removing, but it just takes a little bit of practice and sometimes like this, a couple of goes as well. So just be really careful. There we go. I'm obviously conscious. I'm trying to do this and film, and I've got the soldering iron in my left hand, so I'm very, very conscious of where I'm putting that thing. I don't want to put it on me or the guitar, quite frankly. Imagine if this is somebody's, you know, $2 baby. You don't want to be putting soldering marks on any of this finish. Okay, so we're going in again. Solder sucker primed. Let's take another filling. Let's extract another tooth. We didn't quite get there with that one. Let's go in again. You'll see the solder heat up almost instantly if you've got a good iron. And there we go, she's free. A wet cloth, just get rid of the excess solder. And it should leave the tip nice and shiny and tinned like that. I don't think this camera's gonna focus near enough. It's not gonna play ball. But yeah, it should be nice and shiny on the end once you've tinned it correctly. And there we go. So all wires are now free. So until I move on to the next step, I'm going to actually unplug the soldering iron so that I don't A, forget it, or I don't B, accidentally knock anything, burn anything. So let's get the guitar flipped over, and then it's just be a nut on the other side just to take the switch off. So just brace the switch underneath and it should just come straight off. Again, don't lose these bits, they might come in handy for the new switch. Also, before you chuck these switches out, if you can, salvage this. You'd be surprised how many times this part goes missing. If you've got a spare in your little spares hardware set, could get you out of a bind one day. If your guitar is a bit worse for wear, this might be a good opportunity to clean under where the switch nut was. If you still had some wrapping from the pick guard, anything like that, get rid of that now, give it a bit of a clean. As you can see with this one, I keep this pretty spotless, other than wear and tear, which is unavoidable. But we'll just give it a quick, very, very quick clean with some rubbing alcohol, just while we have access to that little piece. Nothing to lose by doing that. Okay, so the great people at Gordon Smith actually provided me with a new switch. This is a Switchcraft switch, so really, really high quality. So we just do it in reverse, really. Just, you know, locking washer on there. I'm reusing the old hardware because it didn't come with new hardware. So I'm reusing the lock and washer. Okay, so off camera I've made just this little protector for the guitar, because when you're doing new solder, if you drop a little blob of this, it's going to burn through that lacquer. So we don't want to do that. We want to protect the guitar at all costs. So we have some 60-40 solder, getting harder and harder to get hold of, but lead free, it just doesn't cut it in music. So anything musical, stay away from lead free. It's a different kind of switch, so there is some rejigging to do, but it's not too bad. There's just enough slack on the cables. They're very stingy with the slack, I must say, but luckily there's enough. In an ideal world, you'd do this outside of the guitar and then just put it in. Let's get my little makeshift guard in place, which is literally just cut out of a cardboard kind of cereal box. Nothing special. If you're out on the road, just find whatever you can just to protect that body. Kitchen roll, low-tech masking tape, whatever you can find, just to make sure that you don't get any solder drips on this finish, because it will ruin it. I'm zoomed in here as much as I think I practically can without it being an issue. Because it'll be in the way. But first thing we want to do is just tin the end of the soldering iron, which we do just with a nice fresh bit of solder on there. Just get it coated, and then you wipe off the excess on essentially a wet cloth. A baby wipe works okay as long as you're very quick, because you don't want the wipe to melt. But you can see there, piece of solder dropped off. Had I not had this guard there, that would have burned through the finish potentially, and we'd have had all kinds of problems. So what we're going to do is put the soldering iron on the connection point and the wire, heat it up for a couple of seconds, and then you just feed this. It's already flux cored, don't need to put any flux in there. We'll just feed this in, get a nice clean joint, and then walk away. Okay, I'm going to give myself lots of slack on the solder so that I can do it from a distance. So press in, let it heat up for a few seconds. This will vary depending on the thickness of the connection lug. Feed a little bit of solder in and pull away. Now the camera won't see this, but that is a really, really nice, clean connection. You don't want to get a cold solder joint, which is where you'll have problems with the joint just coming away. Okay, that's one done. So this I fear is going to be a little bit trickier. This is getting the pickup selector wires in, and there might be just enough meat on these cables. It's very, very tight. You can just see how fiddly this is. This is why ideally you would have enough wire left to do this off body. So exactly the same concept, we're just going to be waiting just a few seconds longer before we start feeding in. And even then it's going to be very tricky, so we'll just let that heat up. I can see a little bit of oil on there starting to boil, which is a good sign that maybe we're there. There we have a nice connection. And there we have a nice clean connection. Wipe off the soldering iron. Okay, this is the moment of truth. Let's put our hat on for concentration. It's a cold night in the studio. So, well, it makes noise, so that's a good start. Oh, it's horrifically out of tune, but So that's it. She's all soldered back up and everything's working. The pickup selection is working. And now the problem. Completely gone. As predicted, that pickup switch was the problem. It's been completely replaced. The old one will go in the bin. Now, as I said, these are a weak point. Not many people realise they go straight for the pots and think there's an issue there. I think if you're having cutting out, that kind of thing, the switch a lot of the time is the problem. Even the Fender kind of 5-position ones. I think it's just that these switches take a bit of punishment, you know. It's a moving part, more so than the potentiometer. So there's your weak point. In this case, it was totally right. It's completely fixed. So if this was a client's guitar, they'd now be very, very, very happy with you. And they remember stuff like this. So it comes back to what I'm harping on about in almost every video I make that is regarding tips for a guitar tech, and that is learn to solder. So I hope you found that video helpful. Obviously it's really tricky with the camera angles to show you much because the wires are just so teeny tiny, and the camera has its limitations, but hopefully that's a little bit helpful. Tips and tricks along the way. A big thing is obviously protecting that finish to make sure that you don't do any damage with the soldering iron, because that's a hot piece of kit. Thanks very much for watching. If you found the video helpful, please consider subscribing, because then you'll be able to see when new videos get uploaded. And if you want to see more regular updates of what I'm up to, come and find me on Instagram at James Pendle, and because that's my regular point of activity. So you'll see much more goings on there. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next one.